Anxiety relief in children. Can Harry Potter help? Now, what's this all about? Can Harry Potter help? Well, I get a lot of parents and they ring me and they say to me, listen, I understand that you work with people with anxiety. Could you help my child? And when they say child, this can be anyone from 5 years all the way up to 12, 13. And I often find myself, certainly the younger they are, saying, well, I tell you what, let me show you some things that you can do with your own kid. So I thought I would share these with you, and one of them has to do with Harry Potter. So parents will ring me and they'll say, listen, my child has anxiety, they're afraid of dogs, can you help me? Or they are afraid of monsters coming into the room at night, or they're not sleeping because they're afraid of school, or and so on and so on and so on. So is there anything I can do to help them? Sometimes I do work one-on-one with children in that capacity, but often as a first port of call, I will do a quick 15 minutes with the child just to help them understand a particular process and see if that helps. Because, hey, guess what? If they can get through this without having to go and see someone and it turns into a whole big thing, then I think that's a thing worth doing. So I want to share with you what is the strategy. And by the way, just a quick aside, one of the reasons why I'm making the time to put all this stuff out there is because I'm keen to help as many people as possible. And without your support, that really wouldn't happen. So please do, if you like this, if you think it's useful, share it, comment on it. That's the way that YouTube knows it's worth keep showing my content to others. So that would be really appreciated. So now on to this process. Now, years ago, when I first trained in something called NLP, I learned something called the Swish Pattern. And this is essentially where people make certain images in their head, and if they're images that they don't like or they're having an unhelpful response to, you show them how they can change the image, push it further away perhaps, make it black and white into the distance, and then you bring up, at the same time as that disappears, you have another image appear. An image that usually is one of an ideal version of yourself. And I give you an example of where you might apply a swish pattern. You might use it with a nail biter. So you might get people to imagine the hand that they bring up to do the nail biting. And as they imagine seeing that hand coming up, you get them to take the image of it, and as they make the image smaller, you bring up another image of how they'd like to be, their ideal self. And what happens if you practice that 3 or 4 times and you get it doing it quickly, the brain begins to associate that this thought of, oh, I should bite my nails, actually leads to an image that reminds them of how they want to be. And guess what? Anything you practice, you get good at. So the swish pattern has been immensely useful over the years. And I also started playing around with it a while ago with people who had anxiety. Let's take dogs, for example. I'd say, what's the scariest thing you can imagine? And they'd say, well, I have an image of a dog about to attack me. Okay, cool, right. And then we'd play around with, for example, finding a way for them that we could get rid of the image. And as that image went, bringing up an image of ideal self connected to a really good feeling, a feeling of confidence or power. And if you got them to practicing that enough, you pretty soon began to find that I could say now, conversationally, just tell me, think about dogs, and you just watch their brain flip to the more positive image that was connected to the good feeling. Now, this is going to work because why? Next time they're out with a dog and they start having that image of dog coming up and about to attack them, instead of them connecting with the feeling, they've already trained the brain so that a better thought immediately pops up. And if they get absorbed in that thought, they get that good feeling, they suddenly discover, oh, I'm feeling different now. Now, I've been using that for a long time. I've done it with fear of flying. I've done it with dogs. And I was then watching Harry Potter, The Chamber of Secrets. And I'd like to show you a really cool clip of it. And this is a moment where one of the teachers, and he's teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts, a guy called Remus Lupin, he's showing them how they can deal with a creature in the world of Harry Potter called a boggart. A boggart tends to hide in dark, small places, cupboards and drawers and things like that. And no one knows what it looks like when it's hidden from view. The only thing we know is that when it comes out, whoever's closest, it takes the form of whatever scares them the most. And so he teaches them a spell. And the spell that he teaches them is ridiculous. And there's a particular swish of the wand that they have to do, and they have to go ridiculous. But it's not just the words. The trick is whatever they're most afraid of, they have to picture in their mind the thing they're most afraid of, but with a funny twist.
What really finishes a boggart is laughter. You need to force it to assume a shape you find truly amusing. Let me explain. Neville, will you join me, please? Come on, don't be shy. Neville, what frightens you most of all?
Professor Snape.
Professor Snape, yeah. Frightens all. And I believe you live with your grandmother.
Yes, but I don't want that boggart to turn into her either.
No. It won't. I want you to picture her clothes, only her clothes, very clearly in your mind. Now, when I open that wardrobe, here's what I want you to do. Excuse me. Imagine Professor Snape in your grandmother's clothes. Can you do that? Yes. Wand at the ready. 1, 2, 3. Think, Neville, think.
Ridiculous!
Wonderful, Neville, wonderful, incredible. Okay, to the back, Neville.
It struck me, this idea of saying ridiculous and having the boggart turn into something that was funny seemed very to me like a swish pattern, and it seemed like a way that I could teach a swish pattern to children. And by the way, for children who love Harry Potter, they love this. They get this so beautifully. So here's what we get them to do. And there's a few parts to this, so it's worth hanging on, because at the end, I'm going to share with you a few thoughts as to like some downsides that you need to be aware of for doing this to make sure that they do it effectively. So one of the first things that I would do is I would want to sow the seed that whatever they think they're afraid of, it's not what they think, it's what they think. And I know that sounds a bit cryptic, but bear with me. If you ask them to think about dogs, and we'll use dogs as an example, if you ask them to think about dogs and they go, it's a really useful move to then make the point that if you can feel worried or anxious about dogs, when there aren't any dogs, what do you think that means? See if you can guide them to realizing that it can't be the actual dogs themselves that are making them anxious. It's their thoughts about it. Once they begin to understand it's their thoughts about it, this is really useful, because now what you can do is move into, so now I'm going to show you how you can change the way you think about it. And that's how you'll know this is going to work really, really well. So step 1, get them to connect with the idea it's just the thought of the thing they're afraid of, not the thing itself. Step 2, give them some stuff to pay attention to. When you ask them to think about, and we're using dogs as an example, but you can apply this to anything. When you ask them to think about dogs, is the mental picture when they think about it, is it in colour or is it in black and white? Now, it doesn't matter what they say. So let's say they say it's in colour. Okay, so you've got a picture of dogs. Is it in colour? Yeah. All right, so tell you what, try this as an experiment. Make it black and white in your mind and tell me, does that make it more scary or less scary? Often you'll find that when they start thinking about it differently, it changes the way they feel about it. Another good one is where do you picture this? Is it in front of you, the image? Is it to the right, to the left? And how big is it? Now, you'll often find with things that people are afraid of that they make them as big images and they feel close up. And they'll often go, oh, it's right here. Ask them to make it smaller and push it further away. And check, how does that feel? Most of the time they'll say, yeah, that doesn't feel quite as scary when it's smaller and further away. Now you can start to combine these things. So make it smaller, further away, and make it black and white. You might also find if it's a movie in their mind that they're scaring themselves with, get them to make it a still, like a still image. And now you want to begin to combine all of these things together. So just get them practicing making the image and notice the language I use, make the image that in the past has been scaring you. Why? That implies that soon they won't be afraid of it. So we're just sowing seeds already at this stage. Make the image that in the past has been scary for you, and as soon as you make it smaller, further away, make it black and white, shrink it down, and when you push it over there, how does that feel? Now, often they'll say it feels better, and then we tell them we're going to do some magic like Harry Potter. We're going to teach you the ridiculous spell. And when you do the ridiculous spell, what you really want to do is have a conversation with them about what would be the funniest thing you could ever imagine happening to that. So, for example, if they're afraid of spiders, roller skates on his legs, would that make them laugh? If it was dogs, what if the dog was filled with helium and began to float away? It doesn't matter what it is, but as long as they actually giggle and laugh and resonate with it, it has to be something that really does emotionally tickle them and make them laugh when they picture it. Now, it doesn't matter if you need to get silly or create fantasy around it. You're simply just giving the brain a new direction to move in. That's all. Once they've got something that when they think about it, it kind of makes them laugh, you want to now piece this whole sequence together. So you're going to ask them to close their eyes. It's not essential, but it can help with focus. Have that image of that thing that used to scare them, past tense, come up. And as soon as it comes up, make it smaller, further away, black and white. And as it's vanishing, say ridiculous. And have an image come back of that thing in the funniest thing you can possibly imagine. The funniest form, the funniest shape. And when they laugh, it's a thing of beauty. And when they feel good, they laugh, you get them to open their eyes, that's it. Get them to repeat that sequence 4 or 5 or 6 times. Have fun with it. Get them to picture it. As soon as you picture it, make it smaller, black and white, send it off into the distance, and as it's disappearing, ridiculous! And bring up that funny image of that thing. Dog with the helium, the spiders with the roller skates. It doesn't matter what it is. Make it seem silly. Here's the cool part. After 4 or 5 times, say to them something along the lines of, now listen, you've done that 4 or 5 times. I'm going to show you how powerful your brain is now at making new connections. Try and bring up that old image of that thing that used to scare you and notice what happens all by itself. And then just look at them expectantly. And often what you'll discover is that when they picture it, they suddenly start laughing. They start laughing. Why? Because in their head, they're now running that pattern. They know to take that thing that used to scare them and change it in the form of something that makes them laugh. And you'll watch them non-verbally respond when you've done this well. If every time they think about that thing that used to scare them, they're now giggling, that's building a new blueprint for success. You can get them to practice that repeatedly, 5, 6, 7 times a day, or if they need. One of the best things about this, by the way, is because it also gives them something to do without you simply saying, no, you'll be all right. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's okay. This gives them some tools. It gives them something to practice, something they can get good at, and something they engage in and enjoy. So it really does work well. By the way, do they have to be a Harry Potter fan? Of course not. They don't have to be a Harry Potter fan in order to get the value from this. I have done this with people who have no idea who Harry Potter is, never read the books, told them about the boggart and how you defeat it, and some of them have got caught up in the imagination of that and enjoyed that as a tale. And others, I haven't even talked about Harry Potter at all. I've just shown them, here's a cool pattern that you can use to change the way you think. And I show them the steps, and we don't even say ridiculous. But I did also mention earlier that there may be some potential downsides or traps that you want to be aware of. So one thing we do need to be careful of is that they don't take the idea that pictures in their head are inherently dangerous. When I work with adults, one of the key things that I really want to get across is that our thinking and the images that we make in ourselves don't really pose any threat. And I'll give you a good example of this. If you close your eyes now and imagine that you've won the lottery, and you really imagine that vividly and all 6 numbers appearing and you feel so amazing and you start imagining all the things that you'll do with the money and it's so good. If you open your eyes, tell me, are you now more likely to win the lottery? No, there's absolutely no difference at all because your thoughts don't really change what's going to happen. Now, this is the same with anxiety, or if people are doing a lot of what-if thinking and picturing worst-case scenarios. The reality is we want them to realise that Doesn't matter how big or vivid the image in their mind is, it's still just an image, and doesn't mean that things in the outside world will change or that thing is more likely to happen. So that really, for me, the gold standard of change work is, can they just have the image appear? It could look big, it could look ferocious, but just still feel fine because they know deep down it's just an image. I have found that some children struggle with that conceptually, and this is kind of like an interim way of beginning to help them move towards that. So what am I actually suggesting? What I'm suggesting is that when you start looking at it's just the thought that creates this problem or that you're responding to, you could also add into that, it's just a thought, and it doesn't matter how vividly you picture it, it still doesn't mean it's going to happen. I tell you what, even though it's just a thought, if you don't like that thought at the moment, well, let's show you some other ways in which you can think about this and it might make you laugh, and then you can move into that. But I think we do need to be careful about the idea of sowing seeds that thoughts in and of themselves are dangerous. I hope this has been useful, I really do. And if you've tried this with your children or it's working well, let me know in the comments below. If you're trying it and you're not quite sure of some of the steps, or you want further clarification on it, or you're like, okay, they're beginning to get it, but it doesn't seem to be working, what next? Let me know in the comments. As always, subscribe, share, like, comment, and so on. I hope you've enjoyed, and hopefully Harry Potter will help.